All right. Hey, everybody. How's it going? Yeah, WordPress, WordCamp. It's awesome. So this is community WordPress and Drupal. Community and contribution differences and lessons. I need to slow down. I've been trying to go fast because we only have 30 minutes. So we'll see what happens. Oh, hold on. I need to be closer. Done. Play. And let me move this over here. All right, so this is me. My name is Mike Herschel. I'm the person on your left, if you can't tell. Come on. I work for a company called Lullabot. Lullabot's a full-service digital agency, everything from content strategy to design to development. We work mostly with Drupal. We're responsible for, so we're responsible for like websites like the Grammys, msnbc.com, marthastewart.com, and many, many others. Is it working? Man, this is not as useful as I thought it would be. Right, so who here has ever used Drupal before? All right, right on. Who here has heard of Drupal? That's even better. Who here is just like hanging out? Yeah, right? So Drupal is a free open source content management system. It's used to power websites like whitehouse.gov, weather.com, and like 3 or so million others throughout the internet. Tends to power more complicated websites. Has between 2 and 3% of the market share, which is not much compared to WordPress, but it's still pretty significant. So let's kind of talk about what I'm going to be doing in this presentation, what we're going to learn about. Perceptions between the two platforms. We're going to talk a little bit about similarities between the platforms, core differences, and what we can learn from each other. There's different community strengths and platform strengths between the two architectures. And there's so much to cross-pollinate and learn from each other. Let's talk about perception. Has anyone ever seen this right here? WordPress is for blogs. I think Chris Coyier just talked about it. So this is something that's might have been true in something like 2007, but it's not really true right now. It's pretty obviously BS. You know, I don't know if for those of you who have used Drupal, you know, there's a perception that it's hard to use. And this was also true in 2007, but now it's much less so. Similarities between the two platforms. The main thing I want to focus on is that these are tools to do a job, you know, and the job is frequently the same but frequently different, you know. They're both open source software. Open source software is amazing. It enables people to kind of roll their own stuff and hack at stuff and learn stuff, and I think that's crucial for the modern web. They're both powered by PHP, and they both use MySQL as their primary database. Drupal can use a couple others, but usually it's MySQL. They both use themes and templates for site appearance and you know, and plugins to extend it. And that's super, super important. And the best part is that they both have super strong and amazing communities. There are WordPress events all around the world being planned right now. And very similarly, there are Drupal events all around the world too. And so you can go almost to any, you know, continent and see WordPress events and Drupal events and learn from each other and meet people. Let's talk about terminology. So this is the image that I found when I did a Google search for Drupal terminology word cloud. And it gave me exactly what I found, what I asked for. It's kind of scary looking at some of the stuff in here. There's stuff like Facet API and Panoply and stuff like that up there. And but let's kind of go through some of the stuff just to kind of get a baseline, right? So a module in Drupal terminology is very similar to a plugin in WordPress terminology. A node is almost the same as a post. A block is very similar to a widget. Content type is very similar to a post type, right? Acquia is similar to Automatic. Automatic, for those of you who don't know, it's the company that's founded by Matt Mullenweg, who is kind of the founder of WordPress and does a lot of development on WordPress. DrupalCons are really similar to WordCamp US, and Drupal Camps, if you would guess by the name, are pretty much similar to WordCamps right here, right? And Drupal Association has a counterpart with the WordPress Foundation. Some core differences right here. So Drupal's architecture. Drupal's architecture has been referred to as very, very much of a beast, right? Like beast because it can be mean, but it's also very, very powerful. You know, it's way more developer-centric than WordPress. It's not as simple as going in and just editing your main template file typically. It uses Symphony PHP framework and core, which kind of lends itself to more object-oriented type programming. Uses Twig templating. If you haven't seen Twig templating before, it uses like a very common like little curly brackets that you will see. And one of my favorite features of Drupal is that you can export its configuration to some text files, which then you could throw your text files up on your live server, and at that point, all your changes are deployed, and that's really cool. On previous versions of Drupal and in the current version of WordPress, if you want to push your changes up, you have to push your database up. And you push your database up, you have the potential to overwrite content, Drupal has separate database fields, database tables per field. So if you go in and you create, like say I have a content type, which is very similar to a post type, and I want to create a different field on that, say like an image field or a geolocation field or something like that, it'll create a different database table for that as opposed to like throwing it into like WP Post or Post Meta or something like that. And that kind of lends itself toward like more complicated queries, but at the same time, your database has more tables. It doesn't do auto updates and it doesn't do auto installation of themes. It kind of assumes that you are a developer, So you're not gonna, it's not kind of a set it and forget it type thing. Drupal's modules are tools that enable you to build additional functionality as opposed to like a lot of turnkey solutions that WordPress might have. Where I might install like, say like, I might want like a slider widget, and with Drupal I would build that out using core functionality. With WordPress you would download a plugin to do something like that. Drupal's man, this is getting annoying right here. Drupal's modules have a built-in API that allows them to depend on other modules, which is a little bit different than WordPress. WordPress can do this, but it's not like kind of a built-in API. And it's common for modules to depend on one another that are created by different authors, right? With very few conflicts. And it's really not uncommon for Drupal sites to have like 100+ modules installed and enabled and working together without problems. If you try to do that if you try to install like 100 WordPress plugins, you're going to have a bad time. There's going to be conflicts and there's going to be things that are going to break. Kind of getting through the meat of this here. It separates this functionality from theme. It separates the presentation from function. So when you're developing a WordPress theme, you can build in your sliders directly into the theme layers. And that's like super, super important to the ecosystem because that means you can actually sell the completed theme and it will include various functionality. With Drupal, it's a little bit different. You build your functionality out using your admin tools. And then the theme on top of that will kind of, make it pretty. It'll apply styles and any type of JavaScript and stuff like that, and what ends up happening is you have non-standard markup when you build it out yourself too, which kind of lends itself toward custom themes, makes it very difficult to purchase themes because the themes aren't going to know what type of markup that you have. They're not going to know your CSS classes and stuff like that. The economies, all this kind of leads into the economies of the two different communities. And this is it's super cool kind of seeing how all of this works, right? So with the WordPress ecosystem, it has very, very robust theme ecosystem, and it's super common to pay money for themes. You know, it's really easy to go out and spend $75 on a theme, install that, and at the end of it, you have almost a fully functioning website, and that's pretty awesome. It incentivizes people to create new themes, you know, because people can make money off of it really easily. People can create a theme and start pulling in $75 a pop, and that's really, really nice. The plugin ecosystem is also super robust. You know, it's very common to pay like money for plugins and like kind of the freemium model, right? So it incentivizes people to create more plugins too. Let's see if this is working. Yeah, let me go back. So this is awesome because it incentivizes people to create new plugins, but it also, one of the potential downsides of this is that you end up with like this huge plugin ecosystem that has a lot of duplicate functionality, you know? If I'm a plugin developer and I want to create something new, like say like an additional form builder, I am not going to, you know, modify someone else's form builder that they're paying money for or that they're selling, you know? I'm going to go ahead and kind of, you know, create my own and try to make money off of it. And, you know, that's good, but what happens is you end up with a situation where you have like 140 different form builders, you know, and that can be kind of intimidating for someone kind of coming in. Drupal Economy is very, very different. It doesn't have modules for sale. All of them are free on Drupal.org, and it kind of incentivizes core contributions or code contributions as opposed to like creating new modules, you know. The way that it works, instead of like selling your code directly in a theme or in any type of like freemium model, it kind of incentivizes people to develop and contribute patches to already existing solutions. And if there's not a solution, create a new one. And what happens is people will hopefully get their name out and be able to make more money. You know, when you apply for a job, you can say, I've contributed to this module, and contributed this feature to this module. And that allows me as a developer to command a higher salary or hourly rate or something like that. One of the incentives of this is it incentivizes the community not to constantly reinvent the wheel, which is good, where you'll have like one or two solutions to a very common problem, as opposed to WordPress will have a whole bunch of solutions, which, as I said earlier, can be good and bad, you know. Let's see if I can get this to work here. It has a very weak commercial theme ecosystem. You know, there are commercial themes that you can purchase, but it's not very common to do so. Because the functionality is decoupled from the presentation, markups one-off, and it makes it super difficult to have one-off themes or turnkey themes. And so because of that, there's not a large selection, and so Drupal sites tend to require custom themes, which in turn kind of feeds back on itself. Because the architecture typically requires custom themes, that means there is going to be less themes available. So what can Drupal learn from WordPress? You know, there's a whole bunch of really great stuff that WordPress is doing well, because WordPress controls 27% of the internet, which is absolutely humongous. Like, that's a big deal, right? So this is a screenshot I took of the admin dashboard in Drupal. And you can see it's kind of hard to use. You don't kind of know where to get started, but it looks pretty powerful, right? So like onboarding new developers, right? I would love to see, like, as I talked to earlier, a theme browser and a module browser integrated within the dashboard GUI, you know, and it might not need to be enabled by default or, you know, available, turned on, you know, but I think something like that would like enable the casual explorers of Drupal to get in here and kind of learn and poke around and install stuff for the sake of installing stuff and screwing around, which is super important. I would love to see automatic updates. When I was demoing this presentation, I talked to a developer, and the developer said he does both WordPress and Drupal, and he said, well, a lot of times I will specifically do WordPress because Drupal does not do automatic updates. And that's something that I think could be important. There's a little bit of give and take in this. It's been discussed by the Drupal community, and it requires a writable file system. A writable file system is kind of a security concern in its own, but at the same time, if you're not doing module updates, well, I think module updates are maybe more important than a read-only file system. More changes needed, right? Media management, core committers, better documentation tools, and easier updates between major versions. Let me kind of go through some of this right here. So media management is the ability to upload an image and be able to reference it very easily from other pieces of content, being able to find that image, being able to pull it up, and the same with, videos and everything like that. I would love to see more committers. Drupal 8, as of a couple weeks ago, just had, I believe, 8 committers. WordPress has 23, and what that enables is WordPress to kind of move at a more rapid pace. Better documentation, I accidentally crossed that one off up there. Better documentation tools, that's something that's being worked on. Easier updates between major versions. So media management is being worked on right now. That's going to come out in the next minor release of Drupal. When I say minor release, I'm talking right now we're on Drupal 8, we're going on Drupal 8.3, and Drupal 8.4, media management is going to be built in, and that's going to be awesome. You can do all this with Contrib right now, but it's harder to find, harder to configure. Once we have that core set of APIs, I think, like WordPress does, that's going to be awesome. We have more core committers as of just a couple weeks ago. We added 3 more. We're trending in the right direction. Better documentation tools on Drupal.org's website. There's new content types and new work being done on that just makes your tools easier to write better documentation. And the biggest thing right here is just easier updates between new version. This is the biggest change that we've seen in Drupal in a long, long time, right? So in 2006, there's this great quote right here: preserving backwards compatibility often requires that you drag historical baggage along. And interpreted languages like PHP, this creates a significant performance cost. So this is the founder of Drupal, Dries Boytar, in 2006. So if you have ever done a major version Drupal upgrade, it's a pain in the butt. You need a developer to do it. You need to migrate content, and that's kind of difficult, As of a couple, as of maybe about a week and a half ago, this has changed, Upgrading between Drupal 8's latest version to Drupal 9 should be as easy as upgrading between minor versions to Drupal 8, right? So what's going to happen with Drupal is on every minor version, which is from 8.1 to 8.2, etc., there's going to be new APIs and new functionality introduced. And at the same time, there's going to be old APIs that are still available, but they're deprecated. So you shouldn't use those anymore. As long as your modules and your site is using the new stuff, as it probably will be, going to Drupal 9 from Drupal 8 is going to be super, super easy, as it is with WordPress. And that's awesome. That's a big deal, Drupal 8 was released maybe about a year and a half ago. We probably have a good 3 or so more years with Drupal 8. And going to Drupal 9 on 4 years on top of that means that your site's going to be relevant for maybe 8 years without doing any type of major migration work. And that's pretty awesome, in my opinion. So what can WordPress learn from Drupal? I'm assuming most people here are WordPress developers or WordPress people, because this is a WordCamp, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. So WordPress is for blogs, right? Yeah, right. But something that it could use is more and better APIs, something like Drupal has a form API and render API that kind of standardize the creation of forms and the output that's output on the screen. That's something that WordPress could use if multiple plugins had a standard way to output their, to do their output and put that on the screen that can interact nicely with each other. The ability to manage content types and fields through a GUI, this would be a big deal. This is very similar to advanced custom fields, and being able to do this and kind of extend those fields on top of that in core would be huge, because at that point, your developers could standardize on on like a certain set of APIs, as opposed to, like, I know there's advanced custom fields, and there's the other one that Chris just talked about. An API for plugins to depend on one another, right? So like if you had those first two, this third one is kind of logical, where I could say I'm creating a plugin, but this plugin depends on this other plugin. And at that point, my plugin developers could start kind of working with each other as opposed to against each other like they do in frequent situations. More developer friendly, like robust caching. Right now, WordPress's caching is very page level, right? So Drupal, you can cache certain parts of the page at different, with different criteria than other parts of the page, and that kind of makes everything a little bit more dynamic, you know, and a little bit easier to work with in authenticated scenarios. Configuration management, like if WordPress had the ability to kind of write its configuration as you're developing on your local computer and then deploy that to a server without doing any type of like crazy database diffs and splits like a lot of these modules that kind of solve that problem do, that would be fantastic. More and better code sprints, right? So Drupal events typically have the ability to do a code sprint where everybody kind of sits around. You have hundreds of people sitting around working together to do type of stuff. So this has actually been done, the code sprints have been done at WordCamp US. WordCamp US last year had a contributor day where they had like several hundred people sitting around in the same room working on WordPress stuff, you know, working on WordPress core, with people helping out each other, you know, and maybe if they don't know, if they're not a developer, they might have been working on documentation. And this is a super important way to connect with the community and learn and network, and like that's one of my favorite parts of many Drupal events, right? Security improvements, like WordPress has this, it's such a large target, you know, it contains you know, it's 27% of the web, so it's kind of like Windows. It's going to be actively targeted. I would love to see some type of brute force detection and flood control built into WordPress core. There's module or plugins that you download that enable this, but I mean that's something, in my opinion, would be amazing. Right now, WordPress's minimum PHP version is 5.2. 5.2 is not supported yet, and if you're running version 5.2, that means that you're most likely have some security vulnerabilities on your server, and that's not good. WordPress could, if WordPress would only support, say, like 5.5 and newer, or 5.4 or something that's supported, that would force all the hosts to upgrade their PHP, and I think that would be huge. I would love to see an official mailing list for security issues. I did a lot of research for this, and I found some old like forum posts on WordPress.org from like several years ago talking about this, and they said it was in the works. There's some third-party mailing lists that you can get on, but you know that would be like pretty helpful in my opinion. Competition's healthy. The competition between our two systems, we're pushing each other. WordPress is pushing itself up into the enterprise market. There's tons of enterprise sites built with WordPress now, and it's fantastic because it's free and open source. You know, Drupal is becoming a lot more user-friendly, and a lot of that comes because WordPress is so user-friendly. You know, we're pushing each other to be better, you know. So I want to plug Florida Drupal Camp. Florida Drupal Camp is going to be in February this coming year. I'm an organizer of that. It's very similar to this, with about 250 people. It's pretty awesome. And so, like, it's awesome. So this is like, so this slide right here, I did the majority of my work on. So just watch the cool animations. Right? Right? I'm not done yet. Is it going? Yeah. So I probably spent like 20 hours on that last slide. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so questions or comments? Or is everybody just hungry and looking for lunch? I got a question up there. No. So the question is, does Drupal offer two flavors similar to Drupal.org and WordPress.org and WordPress.com? So Drupal does not have its own like hosted solution similar to WordPress.com. There were some companies that have tried out that, but just wasn't financially successful. So basically, in order to use Drupal, you need to download it, and you need to host it on many different hosts. Yeah. I don't know. Like, I don't know why people don't, or no. I think the question is people chuckle when they hear the word Drupal. I guess so, yeah. I can see that. I Drupaled my pants. Go ahead. I really hope they do push the PHP version. Honestly, I don't know what's been going on with Jetpack. So Jetpack, I'm assuming, has been increasing their minimum PHP version. Is that what you're getting at? Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. So the question is, like, how important is PHP, like having a modern version of PHP? I would say it's very important. Like, security is not just one layer, it's like defense in depth. And, you know, like WordPress is such a popular target, it's easy, like I really don't see a downside with it, you know. Yeah, backwards compatibility, but that's an issue that's, you know, that's not unsolvable. It might be true. Yeah, but I mean, there's however many, you know, millions of WordPress sites out there. They're not all going to be using you know, reverse DNS or security, you know, software built in. You know. Yes. Up there. Hello. Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, so the question is, like with the change to Symphony and Twig, has there been pushback? And there's been a ton of it. Like, I have a coworker who actually forked Drupal and created a content management system called Backdrop. Backdrop is fantastic. It has like a ton of usability improvements that, in my opinion, Drupal should incorporate. It's basically it's a version of Drupal that does not include, it does not include like all the object-oriented changes, you know, like Symphony and stuff like that. And it also doesn't include Twig. I think there's less pushback for Twig. Everybody loves Twig and the new Drupal 8 theming engine. But going from a largely procedural like code base to an object-oriented code base, there's a learning curve. And a lot of it's a lot more difficult. And when you're developing with that, you really need an IDE where previously you could use more of a text editor, you know, but an IDE helps you out so much, and it's almost crucial in that. So there's been a huge pushback with that, but, you know, there's give and take. I do, yes. I do use PHP Storm, yes. You're welcome. Any more questions? Go ahead. Yeah, so that's a great question. So the question is like certain like business cases and use cases of switching from Drupal to switching from WordPress to Drupal. So there's a ton of overlap. There's a lot of situations where WordPress and Drupal can manage the same type of content. I have a friend, I do his website in Drupal, and it's a lawn care business. Like, it's kind of screams, something like that would scream WordPress, right? Drupal has it's a lot more developer focused, right? So like kind of working with large teams of developers is a little bit easier with Drupal because moving configuration back and forth is very easy. Drupal also has like a lot more robust caching. So if you're doing like any type of like authenticated stuff, like Drupal can cache certain parts of the page separately than other parts of the page, and it can kind of put this together at the very end before sending it down the pipe to the end user. Drupal has really robust APIs for hooking in like new functionality. So if you're trying to integrate in, like, I don't know, any type of weird API or something like that, Drupal is frequently a good choice for that. Has very robust like user permissions. You know, its user permissions are very, very granular, and we're working on integrating in a default workflow where you have like, say, like, you know, an author who can, you know, save something but not publish something without going by an editor or sending it to legal or something like that. Like you can do that right now through modules, but that's being integrated into core, which will provide that standard set of APIs which people can then extend. You know, Drupal's also like very similar to WordPress, where you can kind of hook in at like any point in the process and kind of modify stuff. It kind of lends itself toward like more complex websites, you know, complex, and it also works for like when you have multiple websites that are distributed across, you know, but hooked together with different authentications, like that works very well too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sounds like it's really targeted towards Fortune 1000 companies.
It is, but it is targeted toward like large enterprises, but at the same time, you don't have to use it in that way. You know, it works very well with small, simple sites, but then again, when you're working with a small, simple site, if you know WordPress, there's really, you know, unless it's doing very complex things, you know, there might not be a reason to use Drupal over that, or honestly, vice versa. Go ahead. Like there's a website called Built With that'll kind of do stuff, but I was kind of looking. The question is like, is there a detector, right? So there's a couple ways. If you look at like the source code, you know, by default, Drupal will actually insert a meta tag that says powered by Drupal 7 or powered by Drupal 8. You know, you can turn that off. You can also look at like the file structure. Like Drupal's file structure is like site default files, and if you see anything under sites, it might be a Drupal site, you know. Like I said, like Built With, you can use Built With to kind of see what software websites use a lot of times. Go ahead. Okay, so there's Droop Scan and CMS Scan, and I'm sure if you Google those will come up. Okay, that's cool. That's good information. Questions? Lunch? Food? Thanks.